Hey there, good evening. This is the usual chips and bricks setup, but tonight we're going to do something special. We are going to record a seminar for you for Initial Demo Party 2005 version 2020 on recording from old computers these days. How can we do it? What do you need? What are some tools? And what are some, tips and tricks? Whatever is available. Not really sure if there is some kind of chat where you can ask questions, or if I'll be able to join you and ask them. Anyway, also the idea is that after the seminar there will be a separate Q&A session. If that doesn't work, sorry. If it works, cool. See you there. And that's basically it. So today we don't have Mr. Commodore, we don't have Mr. Amiga, we don't have Mr. Display. What do we have? We have a slide deck, and I'll be living either here in the corner or here in the corner, depending where the text is a little bit. So let's just get going, and going from recording from old computers in 2020. And for those who are unfamiliar with me, I am the arrogant bastard, also known as FRaNKy from Royal Belgian Beer Squadron, Accession, Digital Sound Systems, Smash Designs, and Belgians as a Service. For real life, I do project management. I am part of the revision organizing team and also a host on Assembly TV. And every week and every Sunday, I host Chips and Bricks on Twitch, later available on YouTube, where we stream demoscene productions from real hardware as much as possible, but I don't think we've played a movie yet. So, with that out of the way, you know how I am, you now know who I am, that's better. Let's throw a disclaimer in here because it's important. So, this presentation will give an opinion. It will display a method that works, a method that's quite affordable. No, it's not perfect. Yes, you can always improve things, but this is a bit looking back at proven technology. I've been in and out of recording stuff from 64s and Amiga since the era of the Breakpoint demo party, so that is your mid-2000s, so more or less 15 years and some. So, I've been down the road. I don't know everything, I don't claim to be, I just know that this setup works, and I'm going to walk you through it, to the knowledge that I have gathered and that is a bit available out there on the interwebs, to put it all together in a nice slide deck. Also, for you people of the future, we are recording this in September 2020, so if in 15 years HDMI is completely obsolete, today it's what we have. Let's just get that over with. Also, I want to get rid of some misconceptions that people tend to have when talking about recording other older computers, and the first one is that a pixel is not a square. A pixel is an area in memory which is thrown out using an electron beam on a screen, on a phosphor layer, and what you will get at best is a fuzzy dot. Now, from that fuzzy dot, your computer, which likes to work in squares, will have to make something it can work with. And that's where people come to me like, I want to see square pixels. Yeah, no, actually square pixels is not a thing. Square pixels is an interpretation of an analog blob thrown on a phosphor screen, so that your modern hardware, your modern screen of today can actually interpret it and do something with it. There's a very nice article that describes how that works. Link is on the slide here, and just have a look at it. It works with reference points, mathematical formula to get like the average of the blob. For instance, as you can see on the left, these blobs, they overlap, and programmers of back in the day learned how to use that. If you had limited colors on the system you were programming with, Commodore 64 has 16 colors. Also, older arcade machines had 16 colors. If you wanted like a slightly lighter hue of red, you would put red and white next to each other, they would overlap a bit, and there you had like a pinkish color in the middle where they would overlap. When you go towards square pixels, you risk of losing a lot of that information. Also, this does not has to do anything with scan lines. Scan lines are a thing which happen on a CRT screen that make it look more authentic. But pixels and scan lines are, people will say they're related. I think they're not. They do a lot to the retro feel and the aesthetics. But having scan lines does not take away the fact that pixels are not a square. Now, I know I have by now pissed off half of you. I could say I'm sorry, I'm not. No, sorry, not. And yeah, let's just continue, because, you know, first of all, as well, you can never get a perfect signal from an analog source. It is too noisy. You have electronic waves going up and down, you have interference, you have everything. So no matter how good your workflow is, you will always have some kind of too much information, too little information. You know, all these old signals were designed to have a buffer in place, because you had no idea what kind of screen, what kind of TV you were going to throw this at. Was this an old black and white TV? Was this like your run-of-the-mill supermarket CRT TV with, in a budget range? Or did you have, you know, your 100 Hertz 16:9 CRT that weighed 60 kilos? Or were you one of those crazy-ass people with a projection screen TV that had 3 separate tubes down the middle, one for red, one for green, and one for blue? It all had to work with it. So the signals are very bright, very noisy, very much overhead with it. And you still see that today on many digital captures, as good as you're going to see it. So an example here is, it's called the ghosting effect. So if you look at this Amiga boot screen, you will see that around the letters is a bit of a fuzzy area. And what's this? Well, your video cable is not perfectly grounded. You can have other signals running alongside it, the composite video signal, for instance, depending on your cable. If you go online, look on the internet, if you look at 15 search engine hits, you will find 20 referrals to different kinds of video cables, different values of resistors and cable lengths and cable types, and the actual perfection is it's like an UNOBTANIUM for those playing along at home and have to guess avatar. So yeah, don't go for as best as you can. Don't go for perfection. That's not really happen. If it's like when you look at like demos, when you know that, okay, when it looks too good, when you have no idea how it's done to look so good, it's fake. And same here. If I go on YouTube and I see 50 Hertz full HD captures of Amiga demos with absolutely zero ghosting or artifacts or whatever, it's either an emulator or it's one of those Mr. FPGAs, because doing that with the regular hardware on the market, unless you have access to professional video equipment which runs in the 10,000s of euros, then yes, otherwise no. So that, go as good as you can. So this is ghosting as one example. A second one is very known for Commodore 64. The horizontal sync pulse, where it has one of the control signals that exists in the CRT screen, is really strong. And when you go and digitize a Commodore 64 signal, it will show up outside of the border as a white vertical line. If you're smart, you will scroll it out of view. Many older captures on your video websites like YouTube, they don't do this, and that's how you can it will say you it is captured from real hardware, because emulators don't do that. Although yeah, it's the old blanking signal overcompensating, being so strong that your digitizing hardware is just like, oh look, there's an image there, and then it just puts all white there because the image is so is so strong. Now, before we get to the actual methods and how it works, let's go to some history so that you know what the background of everything is. And first of all, there are some different video signals that we need to work with. So you have a composite video, that's just one wire, everything goes together inside one single wire. There is a super video, SVHS, that puts the entire video over 2 wires, so double the bandwidth. Then you have RGB with split red, green, and blue. And then you have triple the bandwidth. Triple the bandwidth means of course more quality for the picture that's in there. You create a bigger potential. You have more room to push, not ones and zeros, it's an analog signal, but you can push through like electrical waves, and you can put more in them, you can put them shorter together, and you can get a better picture out of it. So how do we connect these? Well, your CVBS will quite often be done over an RCA plugs or tulip plugs, or however you want to call them, in your native country. SVHS is a tiny DIN plug with 4 pins, and then there's also an RF cable, which is basically a tuned signal, a CVBS signal, to go through a tuner. So of your older televisions will have that quite often, and some of the older hardware out there will only have an RF signal out. We can work with that, it's not ideal. We will get back to that later. So when it comes to RGB connectors, so of course there's SCART, that's the most known one in Europe by origin. It's a French standard. Read along in your best French accent if you want to. If you cannot, it's the syndicat du constructeur d'appareils, radiorécepteurs et téléviseurs. And that was in a very Belgian French accent, by the way. Otherwise, what you also have is component video. And then there's VGA, used on most PCs, and still available on many monitors of today as some kind of backwards compatibility thing. So it is also something that you could look into if this is of any use to you for using that as a capturing or from scaling, although these days it's kind of going out of fashion, certainly for capturing into more modern devices. Now, as you have also to mention, although that component has like a green, a blue, and a red cable, and then 2 for audio, it's not RGB, it's kind of a mathematical encoding that's active there. So your green cable will have your luminance. This is the same signal as in an S-video cable. It is just tells you how bright that the signal on is. It's basically a black and white picture. The blue cable, the PB, will have mathematical difference between that and the blue color, and red one with the red color. For the green signal, there is no separate cable, because with some simple electronics, I couldn't find the schematic for some strange reason, you can extrapolate the green color from those and put it on there. Also, on a component, you will need to put your sync signal somewhere for synchronization of your CRT tubes. Usually it's on the green one. Some vendors put it on a different wire, but usually sync on green is the most common, but not always. So with that, we've going from the analog world, and we are now going into the digital realm. And there is the major difference between analog and digital video is like the way it's transported and how it is received and interpreted by your displaying device. An analog video is a bunch of waves going up and down through the wire, which will then indicate how much photons of a specific color will need to end up on a phosphor tube and go from there. For a digital display, it just it's a streams of ones and zeros. It's an address. Say, okay, this pixel needs that color. This pixel needs that color. This pixel needs that color. In various methods. Going into the technicalities are like seminars on their own. So as you've noticed, we're going through certain things pretty briefly. For any specific questions, I'll try to do my best to answer them now or during a Q&A session. We'll get to that, as I said before. Not a specialist, I just have found out many of these things during the years. So, having looked at the analog connectors, these are the digital ones. It's DVI and HDMI. DVI comes in a number of flavors. You have a single link and dual link. You have sometimes you have a leftover analog backup line. HDMI tosses all of that out. It's backwards compatible with a single link DVIs. You can just use a passive converter. Big difference is, however, that HDMI is copyrighted, patented, whatever, so you need a license for it if you want to use it on your device. Many people don't bother, however, it does open you up for all kinds of lawsuits should you go into like overall big consumer devices that have HDMI ports. So a workaround there is to use a DVI port and then provide an adapter with it to circumvent all that licensing. But for that, I'm pretty sure there are lawyers who can do seminars on this, and that lawyer at the moment isn't me. So let's just summarize it. What we need to do, we need to get from all of these things, your RF video, your composite, your SCART, your SVHS, your component, your VGA. You need to get one way or the other into something digital, which is DVI and HDMI. And to make it a bit simpler, we are going to ignore some of them. So we are not going to look at RF radio frequency, RF video. It's just too old, too complicated. And there are existing workarounds in place, which we will mention a bit later. And because HDMI is backwards compatible with DVI, we're just gonna skip DVI and just go with HDMI, because that is what your consumer devices today will come with. If you go to supermarket, go to an online store, whatever, you get a TV, it will have HDMI ports and very unlikely a DVI port. So we're gonna skip that. So let's get to the converter hardware. Now, before you get to the hardware, you need to find out and tell yourself a bit, okay, good, what do we want to work with? And every console, every computer has the best picture that can come out of it, and that should be the one that you start to work with. I know I'm going really short over the Commodore lines of computers. The video output of Commodore computers is a seminar on its own. You easily have 3, 4, 5 outputs, however way you want to configure them. The best output is a split chroma luma, which is like SVHS, but it's a stronger signal, so some screens, most of them actually, will not interpret it correctly, so you would have to add resistors to your cable or work with other devices such as LumaFix, which we will mention later. Your Ataris will have composite video or RF. Amigas and Ataris, they will do RGB SCART. Nintendo gaming consoles, bit of a mixed bag. In the US, some do component. In Europe, not. Some in Europe will do SCART, others not, because of budget decisions by Nintendo when they came out. Sega is pretty consistent, except for I think the Master System 2, which is a really budget version with only an RF out. You will have composite video, you will have RGB SCART outputs. Dreamcast also does a VGA output. Why? Because it's basically an arcade system that ran on a VGA screen. PlayStation games, RGB SCART components, and when you go to our British friends, the older Sinclairs are RF only. The Spectrum will have SCART, and I know that for most of these systems you can have add-on kits that will change the output signal to something of higher quality. We are looking here at a stock default value we'll give some examples of possible upgrades later on. So let's just get have a look on what you can use to get from all these older devices to HDMI. For some it's easy, mostly consoles. When you look at like your PlayStation 2 or your Wii or a Dreamcast, there are off the shelf things available, and they're actually not that expensive. They're readily available. I'd like to plug thanks to our sponsor consolecables.be, who does a lot with chips and bricks. They actually have those on offer, and they move pretty well and pretty quickly, so they are good devices. Of course, they're not magic. You know, for a 15-20 euro converter will not give the image quality of a 5,000 euro scan converter. You know, you kind of get what you pay for, but it will work in the end. Also, what these do internally is that they will use the component video signal. So both on your PlayStation, your Wii, will use a component. For the Dreamcast converters, they will use the VGA signal, plus some tricks, because not all games on Dreamcast run on the VGA. This should more or less allow it. Of course, your mileage may vary. And then, as mentioned, for the home computers, there are many scan doublers, graphics cards, whatever, for your home computers. Some examples here are the Indivision series from Individual Computers, which are for the Amiga. You have them both for the 500 OCS as the 1200 AGAs. The newer Apollo accelerator, some of them actually offer an HDMI output or DVI output on the board, so you can bypass everything. This is a solution for the older consoles without a composite video output, is that you have CVBS mods. You have to solder them into the console, so you will of course void your warranty, which expired in 1985. Sorry, think about that. It's important to not break anything in there. Take some signals from inside the motherboard, and then you can exit with a composite video signal. And then at the bottom you have a LumaFix, which is one of the devices used together with the Commodore 64. That will allow you to tweak the signals a bit, so to get the best video output as possible. That being said, there are, these are what we're looking at now is your basic Chinese converter. They're all Chinese, but people call them because they think they're bad quality, and therefore they're Chinese, and that's complete crap. Because they actually work. What they will do, the more budgety ones will take your composite video, wrap around an HDMI signal and send it out. The more expensive ones will take an RGB signal, wrap an HDMI signal around it and send it out. You can't do any other settings. You can say it's PAL or NTSC. I want a resolution of 720p, 1080p, and that's it. Quality will vary. Most systems have okay-ish quality. Of course, nothing perfect. Again, you get what you pay for, and this certainly applies with this. For something in the middle, RetroTink, they have a series now of these basically line doublers, what means that once a horizontal line will come in, it will output it twice, so that you will double your resolution to something up to a point that your HDMI display will be able to handle. The one shown here does composite video, S-video, and SVHS. There are SCART and Pro versions with more options available at your favorite retailers or at the RetroTink website. They work. We are not being endorsed by any of these here. What we have found is that like for a Commodore 64, even with a LumaFix, the signal can still be too strong, and it has no idea how to handle it. This is more caused by the Commodore 64 having a completely freaky video signal than by the RetroTink, but keep this in mind that you might have some issues left and right with them depending on the hardware. For your generic component video signal or S-video or CVBS, these things are fine. You also have an audio input on the side, so you can put everything into one HDMI stream and output it to your favorite video device. If you are in the European market, then you will most likely have a SCART, and for that you have a device called the open source scan converter. It's open source hardware, many varieties exist. They all more or less do the same with some different details left and right, but in general you have either a SCART component or a VGA input and some audio inputs, and it will output an HDMI. The problem with the OSSC and also its strength is that it has a ton of options. You can multiply the screen, you can stretch things, you can change timings, you can add scan lines, you can do whatever. So getting it initially to work is not for the faint of heart and may take some while. So if you have one or get one and you find something that actually shows a picture on your screen, save your settings, because at least you have something to go back to. The menu system is not the most friendly, but you know, as said, you only need to do it once per device that you have. A good thing. They are readily available. They're not so expensive. The really budgety ones run in the 80-90 euros, which I myself wouldn't touch. I would go for like the ones in the 150-160 euro range. A bit better components, a better power supply that doesn't make so much noise on the signal, on the output signal, etc. Maybe a little bit better of a menu structure. It's a bit trial and error. One thing to take into account is that this device is RGB or component only. It will not take composite video or SVHS, so you cannot use this with a C64 unless you, with a device, there are some on the market from Sony, if you can find them, which will split the SVHS signal from C64 into RGB. Then you feed this into that and you're off. You're adding a different step and making it a bit more complicated. Although it is an option, it is a possibility, and you are completely free to try this out. I'm just giving you some ideas. Now, as said, I'm doing this video stuff since the early 2000s, and something that we started to use on the breakpoint parties was this device, which is a Sony DSC 1024 on G for Genlock. You have some versions of this, but the 1024G is the most common one. What this will do, this will take the extremely dirty Commodore 64 video signal, which is not 50 Hertz, it's like 49.5 or 50.5, and because Commodore used cheap components in 1983, and then 20-30 years later you're trying to get this to run on a digital screen which didn't even exist back then. Oh, and these are, for an analog device, these are extremely powerful. They will convert from PAL to NTSC, they will output up to VGA, they even take RGB if you wire a cable together, and the pinout is not that hard, not that difficult. They are becoming a bit uncommon, but if you find them, you can pick them up for like 100 euros, maybe a bit more. I've had a few, not much goes wrong on them. I know that it does not like some Amiga scan doublers, so watch out with that on its VGA input. I've tried one and it completely bricked itself getting that crazy video signal in there, and I have no idea if it ever came back to life. It wasn't mine, it was a rental. So, rental company, if you see this after 20 years, I'm sorry. So that's that, and this was basically technology from the 90s. If you go into the full HD era, I've discovered these EXTRON devices. EXTRON is a video hardware company, and they make these little things, and they're made for full HD. They go up to 1080p, 50p, 60, and everything in between, and it takes a lot of inputs. This one here takes composite video, VGA, HDMI, and you can make your own RGB cable on that as well. Has a very powerful menu that you can use, and because they're not 4K video, they're pretty much being dumped on the market right now. And I don't want to create a Techmoan effect here, but if you want a nice, powerful video scaler that will take your Commodore 64 composite video, S-Video didn't really have good success with it, composite video, or anything RGB and want nice and crisp HDMI, these devices are really something to take into account. One downside, however, and it's really hard to test if you buy one, if you need to update the firmware, you're in for a trip. The drivers, first of all, are made for Windows XP. You can manually install them on a Windows 7, and the new firmwares are paywalled at the vendor, so you would have to find somebody who has them, or you would have to talk very nicely to representative of the company. I was lucky that I could have obtained things from some friends out there who had talked to some people at the company, and it still took me half a day to upgrade the firmware. And while it didn't fix any bugs that I had, it still like made the interface a bit smoother and everything. So yeah, it helps. Also, one thing, they have a really crazy power connector. Make sure you don't lose it, because else, or you can just manually solder some wires on those pins. But let's just not. Okay. Now, with this, you will of course output an HDMI signal, and that signal is, you need to capture that, and there are many capturing options out there which will just basically work. This is the one that I use myself. Every now and then, it's an Elgato HD60S. It takes a lot of input. It takes everything from a VGA 480p to 576p, basically pulse signal, which your OSSC or Ultimate 64 will quite often output, or your regular 720, 1080p, etc. It will do the encoding on your GPU. Although, as we will see later, that's not really an issue. They are affordable, they're readily available. The software is a bit of a quirk. You can get them to work with OBS. Open Broadcast Studio takes a while, but once it's there, you just save your settings and then you never touch them again because you don't need to. That's it. Nice, nifty devices. They work right out of the box. Of course, not perfect quality, but that's why they're not 3,000 euros. A bit higher quality is the BLACKMAGIC design Atom Mini, which is a 4-input HDMI video switcher with, it does picture-in-picture. It does these fancy things because that's what I'm using right now to record this. It is extremely powerful if you use the corresponding software. It has a ton of options, although this is more or less, it's not really a video scaler, it's more of a mixer. So if you want to do some broadcasting, streaming, this is something that I would advise you would take into account. It would make your life, depend more on hardware than on software. One thing to take into account, it needs at least a 720p signal to start with. So having your open source scan converter, your Ultimate 64, or your a Dreamcast with an HDMI output on there might not work out of the box. You would need some in-between technology to bit up the signal a bit so that the Atom can work with it. But once it's in there, it's ridiculously powerful. Value for money is extremely good. There is a Pro version which does hardware encoding and has multi-view on there for the fancy stuff. If you'd like that, you can shell a few €100. I myself didn't need that, so I'm using the standard version. But it's up to you. And I said, okay, sure, but why you do this in hardware? OBS can do all of this. Yes, it can. Although sometimes OBS is very prone to crashing when you switch around a lot. So this is the setup that I'm recording with right now. I have one scene, one input in video, one input in audio, and I record using a high bitrate. And I am doing this pretty much lag free. If you would look at my GPU, it's like 30-40% in use. And I'm doing this with a 6-7 year old extremely shitty graphics card that's in my desktop machine, and doing this 1080p stream encoding also for the Twitch stream and everything, with all the particles and all the noise that happens in all these demos. It will never go over 50%, and usually it idles about 25-30%. It does the thing. What I mean is, you don't really need a high, super duper fancy, super expensive graphics card to do hardware video encoding. If you want to do 3D gaming, you want to make awesome demos, you want to play around in Shader Toy or Bonzomatic and do awesome stuff, yes, that's the thing. If you want to encode video, any basic budget video card released in the last 5 to 6 years will do. It's a standard feature, it just gets thrown onto the chipset. Be sure to check your settings, if you have an NVIDIA card, use the NVENC encoder on the card, don't use your CPU. That's a bit of settings, and that's it. Nothing to worry about. There is hardly any lag or nothing that you will notice when streaming out to Twitch or YouTube or whatever. As I am looking now, I am recording this for 36 minutes. I have absolutely at the moment 0 dropped frames on the GPU card that I'm using now, and I got this for 50, 60 bucks even back then. It was not an expensive card. Why did I got this? My desktop machine back then only took half height cards, and even now I just plugged it into my bit newer desktop machine because it just worked, and I don't really do 3D programming. I just need a lot of screen real estate, and it does the job just perfectly. I'm going too long on this topic here. So, as I've already said, mentioned it a bit, you have 1080p, 50p, 60. What's the difference? Because people tend to confuse it every now and then. So, P50 or P60 means that how many frames or half frames per second are displayed when it comes to the old technology, to your old TV tubes. When you could go to the 220 volts European continents, you would have a 50 hertz signal. When you would go to the US, 110 volts, a 60 hertz signal. And you would have to synchronize your images on something. The broadcaster just sends out a stream of data, and your TV needs to know, okay, I need to start the screen, this is the top, this is the left, this is the right, and you need a synchronization clock. What's the best synchronization clock? The one that everybody has as the power grid. So you use that. Now the thing is that when you have this becomes a bit complicated, so bear with me. If you show an image meant for a 50 hertz machine, like a Commodore 64, an Amiga demo made in Germany, made in Denmark, they will have made it using 50 hertz. Today, your regular PC screen is 60 hertz. So what you will have is, when you have a scroller or a sprite, a character running left and right, what originally was meant as like a very smooth animation that would just flow, because you will start to miss frames and you will have little jumps every now and then. Once, if you don't notice, it's fine. Once you notice they're there, you'll go completely apeshit and you'll want to change it. So that's why, for Chips and Bricks, we can do the entire workflow in 50 hertz. It took us a few times to get it correctly, actually, because it depends what you have under your control and whatnot. We'll get to that later. So that's the thing, that the P50, P60 is important. Many older consoles, if you're in Europe, it's 50 hertz. If you're in US, it's 60 hertz. Also in US, things will go a bit faster because 60 hertz is like, extra percentages, etc. Entire seminars can be dedicated to that. We're not gonna do that. So, and as said, this is the problem. You just have to make sure that your entire chain is in 50 or 60 hertz. Mostly people will do. For demoscene stuff will be in 50 hertz because the demoscene was mostly a European thing. So let's see what you control. So yeah, you start with your C64. You go to your scaler, you put it to HDMI, you throw it into OBS to encode. It goes up to YouTube. YouTube sends it out on the internet to your local browser and then to your local display. So you have, in total, you have 3 parties which control everything. Of course, you will control the top. You can say, okay, this is all nice 50 Hertz and it's not touching anything and it's going to be fine. Then you have to get to throw it at the YouTube video encoder, which is not the most perfect in the world. It's mostly built for speed because they have so much stuff that they get in there, they need to process it. And then you come down to your own PC and your own display, and your own display might not even do 50 Hertz, or you have no idea what it's set to. So many people have come to me like, yeah, you know, your demos, you say you're 50 Hertz, but they're still skipping. And then when you ask them for questions, you find out that their display is in 60 Hertz because it does not swap around automatically. Take that into account. You know, before you start nagging. Also, you know, you cannot be. That's what I said in my third, fourth slide. Like the perfect conversion across the board from like the source to a mobile phone display screen somewhere on the other side of the world is pretty much an Unobtainium. It's really hard to go 50 Hertz perfectly, non-skipping scrollers, whatever, all the way through this chain. Now, we've done all the technical stuff, like, you know, what signals do we have, what connectors do we have, which converters do we have. Let's just now hook all of this up to give you an idea on how this can actually work in practice for you. So I've started up with two examples here. So first one is composite video, which you can upscale line double to something that with a RETROTINK that the Elgato will take and then go off to the recording device. Or you take a SCART, push that into the open source scan converter, and then again into the HDMI capturing device. This is a bit of, I wouldn't call it a budget solution because in the end it is a bit of an investment, but this is more than decent quality for a decent budget. You know, you will get your encoder will be 60-70 euros, your converter will be 150, so for 200 euros you have this hands down and it will work. Not perfect because, you know, more budget but better toys, obviously. So as an example, this is as we did revision online at Easter earlier this year. This was the setup that I used myself over here. So for the composite video, we went into the EXTRON device and then into the HD60S capturing device. For SVHS, we first went to the Sony DSC, we upscaled to VGA, and then the VGA went to HDMI in the EXTRON, and that then went into the capturing device. And you know, when you at the end, it looked more than fine for revision online. We had zero complaints on the quality. Also, we did not do the Amiga stuff here at this location. This was done by Charlie in Berlin, who has a more elaborate and more professional setup when it comes to all the HDMI stuff for the Amiga. So that was done over here. For what we use this for, I think the C64, the Atari 8-bit, the VCS, Atari 2600, etc. That was done with this kind of setup over here. If you don't believe me, I can show you some pictures later on, but I'm pretty sure you believe me. So that's the revision setup. If you look at what we're doing for chips and bricks, it's more or less the same. So we use the same EXTRON for composite video and HDMI, and then we have a second EXTRON because why have one when you can get two? To actually upscale the open source scan converter signal to 720p, because the output by default is not something that the Alta Mini will take. And then from the Alta Mini we go into the PC, which does the encoding using OBS. Let's have some technical details with that. So as said, the EXTRON takes the composite video, makes it to HDMI 1080p 50 Hz, and also converts it back to the original 4.3 image, because by default many of these devices will output widescreen. A bit by accident, actually, but it's what happens. Same for the OSSC, with the default settings, which work and do not kill the video too much. You will get 576p50, which is basically PAL in HDMI, and the EXTRON scales takes the HDMI from the OSSC, pumps it up to 1080p, and then the Atom does not have to do any video conversion. It just stays in a 1080p 50 country and throws it out onto the USB cable, which is then encoded in the desktop machine on our El Cheapo GPU card. So some things here, because as I said, your EXTRON will see the image as widescreen, so you need to squeeze it down again a bit to your original 4.3 format. So this is created also by Charlie of Singular Crew, and I've taken this information from the revision organizer wiki, actually. So of course this is not one-to-one pixel, because you're always I had some comments after a last Chips and Bricks episode. Yes, yeah, but you're not converting one-to-one pixel exact. Of course not. As said, the perfect analog to digital stream is pretty much an Unobtainium. So you get pretty close. You know, the EXTRON has a good scaler, has a good video mixer inside that can make your widescreen back into a 4.3 and make it look very, very, very believable. It will be very close. It will never 100% be exact. Should you care about that? Very likely not. It will look as good as you are going to get it. Yes, it can be improved. No, with this flow, using this kind of old computers, I don't think there is much more room for improvement, unless you are going to, work with FPGA-based systems such as an Ultima 64 or a Mister with a Minimich core, or one of those Spectrum Nexts, which are on their way and also have an HDMI out, so then you can bypass most of it. But you'll probably still need to, as with Ultima 64, need to scale it up to 720p or higher, so that your, in my case, the Atom Mini can actually work with that. So if you take that into practice, so what does it look like with all the cables? And it looks more or less like this. This is a Chips and Bricks setup from when we did the Evoke look back episode in mid-August, not recalling which number that was. So yeah, what's in here, because you see a lot of stuff. So going from the top left, there are the two EXTRON converters, which are underneath the Atom Mini, all the way at the top. Open source scan converter is at the side. You have an Atari 2600, which feeds its composite video into one of the EXTRONs. Then there's an Ultimate 64, which outputs HDMI, which goes into an EXTRON for scaling up to 1080p. Underneath is a Sega Mega Drive, which had its RGB SCART connected to the open source scan converter. Same for the Amiga. During the broadcast, I had to swap them. It was like I had to do one swap during the episode, so I took a long 64 demo and then just hoped it worked. And then also to have a bit more control on the audio, there's a Behringer mixer over there, because not all consoles, not all demos have proper audio mixing. I know a Behringer isn't perfect. I've talked to people that just really hate the op-amps which are in it, and it has no bass, or it has no this, this, and that. I know it's not perfect. It works. Everything can be improved. You can do some tweaking. We haven't done yet. Pretty sure we will get to that. But anyway, we have arrangement that we'll play with that later. I'm a bit running ahead of things right now, so let's move myself back to this corner, because this is a setup for Chips and Bricks. If you look at, for instance, what we do for revision, it's bit comparable, although there is some other hardware involved. Also, thanks to Charlie for this little schematic, by the way. I also taken from the revision organizer wiki. So we have two sections. One is for Amiga, VGA, HDMI as the bottom part. which we use an IMAGEPRO scan converter, and then the Amigas have InDivision video cards, which will output VGA on their own. We have some mixers to level the audio, and then modify the hard stereo panning a bit, that it becomes better to listen at. The first station is for the older hardware, so you will have an open source scan converter, or we have the Sony machine, etc. We're thinking about maybe also putting one of those EXTRON devices in there. We don't know yet. We were going to plan this year. Obviously, we had to have an online version, so we can't. So this is, by the way, this is our E-WERK setup, usually in Saarbrücken. If you see some devices you don't know, like the IMAGEPRO and the BLACKMAGIC recording device, what are they? Well, these are professional equipment. The Barcode IMAGEPRO is a 4K scaler that does pretty much everything. Retail $6,000 US. If you want to rent it for your event, they start at $240 US a day. For that money, you buy an EXTRON used on your favorite auction site, whatever you want. And recording, Revision records in uncompressed half frames, resulting in big files. Also, that is a seminar on its own, or when you're at Revision, when we can all meet again in person, come to the behind the scenes store of the Compo team, and we will explain all of this to you. So, if all goes well, there should be a Q&A session now. In the meantime, some plugging for myself. So we use all of this on Chips and Bricks every Sunday. These are our URLs. Chipsandbricks.eu is the website. We have a Facebook page and Twitter to keep you updated with the shenanigans that we are up to. And then our Twitch URL is twitch.tv/chipsandbricks, where we broadcast every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. CET, and take it from there. Usually an hour and a half of demos on 64, Amiga, PlayStation, Mega Drive. You've seen the setup. You know what's there. It's all played from live hardware. Also, unscripted shows during the week whenever we feel like it. Those will be announced regularly. So hit your subscribe and your like buttons, and wherever the hell that you are doing this. I'm gonna now go into the last slide, which says the end, and I hope to see you in the Q&A session. I promise to keep this under an hour. It's 53 minutes. I think I succeeded. Thank you all for tuning in. Pop me your questions, and I will talk to you soon. Bye bye. Always drink. Remember, always drink.
Hey, FRaNKy.
Hey there.
So Q&A time. Thank you so much for the presentation. That was really cool.
No problem.
I really learned a few things. It didn't really solve my Mega Drive issue, though. You kind of skipped over the RF. Is like RF really bad to capture, like hard, or just the quality is shit?
Well, both. You always have to convert RF to something else. As said, RF is basically a video signal, CVBS, composite video, tuned to a certain signal so that you can send it over the airwaves to an old school TV, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, channel 5, whatever. And going from that, there are devices where you can transform RF back into a composite video signal, but then you're going back to a degraded source. So you'll always have at least go for composite video. That already is 20 times better than RF, and every RF encoder which is in a device like your Mega Drive will need to have a source somewhere from video signals.
Yeah, so
And
better get that directly. I see what you
yeah,
mean.
and that's what with the CVBS mods, that's what they do. You yank out the RF encoder and pick up the signals left and right on the motherboard, and then put that on a plug that we can work with. It's
Hmm.
like it's basically cutting out the middleman. What you're
Yeah,
doing,
I see.
hardware wise. So and certainly when you have a Mega Drive version 1, which has composite video and RGB actually available on the DIN plug, there is absolutely zero reason to use RF.
Because I always, when I was a kid, I always had it plugged up to the television via the RF, so I always thought the quality was better through the RF. And the other one, I'm not sure if I have the cable or not. You were saying that that Cables has it, that company that you work with,
Yes, yes, consolecables.be. We have
console
it installed.
cables, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's definitely interesting. What was I had another question, but I'm drawing a blank looking at my Mega Drive. Um, there used to be some cards that you had to do like capturing RF stuff. I used to have some of that, so you could
yeah.
put like the signal from the TV and you get to tune in to what channel you want and you capture that. But I
Yes,
guess that's a bad solution nowadays.
yeah. Yes, even if your device is RF only, so that would mean like your Atari 2600 or like very old home computers like your ZX80, ZX81, and some other budget machines.
Hmm.
Um, it's absolutely worth to get a converter installed inside of them to get that composite CVBS video signal out of there.
Yeah.
Because well, an, a very old workaround actually was that you would use an old VHS recorder,
Yeah.
where you would plug in the RF tune to the channel, and then that would quite often have a SCART or a composite video out, and you would work from there. But then you're adding more budget equipment into the mix unless you're using really high-end VCS recorders, which usually you wouldn't have in your home.
Yeah, it's more like for studios and TV stations and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. So
But I always had this idea that SCART is like very low quality, that it loses signal very well. But from what you were saying, it doesn't really seem
no,
to be true.
what
Did I get the
from
wrong SCART cables? Because I remember trying to hook up the Wii to my TV and it was just horrible.
it it can be shielding does a lot. You know, how well are the cables shielded from each other? Are they shielded separately? How good are the connectors? So yeah, a good cable can make the difference. The um, and this is from personal experience. What I've noticed is that people who say that SCART is bad,
Hmm.
RGB SCART is bad, have been watching a lot of YouTube videos from Americans that work with a component, so the YPBBR.
Hmm.
When I'm out in the world and I have people come up to me and say, "Hey, I want this cable for that console," suddenly everybody wanted component YPBBR cables for their PlayStation 2s, PlayStation 3s, because some vlogger on the internet has said you need to have this.
Yeah.
So that's something that then picks up, and they will say, yeah, SCART is bad because it's not encoded. Which can it make a difference? Yes, if you use cable lengths of like 3 meter, 4 meter, 5 meter, but your very default 1 meter, 1.5 meter cable length on a SCART will absolutely be perfectly fine for what you want to do.
Even some HDMI cables, like sometimes need to be short, otherwise you get some interference. So it depends a lot.
Exactly the same thing. You should, before you would buy a cable, you would be able to cut it in half and see if the individual wires are shielded, if they are twisted around each other or not. That will also create extra electromagnetic shielding from itself,
Hmm.
etc. So yeah, which is when you get the feedback that all the Chinese, in a negative form, video cables are bad. Well, yes, they are, because
It's the price range, yeah. If you buy the
exactly,
cheapest one available, of course it's not gonna have any
exactly.
shielding.
So if you buy the the 99 cents video cable, of course it's going to suck.
Yeah.
So spend €7 or €10, and you're in a completely different league.
But there are also a lot of cables that like promise this ultramagnetic, super extreme, magnetic in a superlative way, not actually
Yeah.
magnetic, like super awesome cable, golden to double twisted whatever, and it costs like €300, and then it just works the same as your normal cable, and you feel like you've been screwed.
Yeah, it's in Belgium we say it's what the idiot pays for it.
Yeah,
Um,
I can see that.
so now, does it make sense for analog cables? Yes, it can. You have very high quality SCART cables with individual resistors to completely optimize the impedance of the motherboard of your Amiga or from your Mega Drive, and then unknowingly you have a motherboard from a different batch, and then the cable isn't optimal anymore. So you
Yeah.
know you can go this very, very far. Of course, when you are talking about digital signals, it works or it doesn't.
Yep.
If you have gold-plated HDMI cables, etc., to because you can hear the difference, you're fooling yourself.
Question from the chat. Evil says that I own all kinds of outputs you've shown. Is there an one only device for all of them? To HDMI preferred?
Okay, so let me see.
I was thinking the FrameMeister. Do you know it? I remember a few years ago it was very famous for people to use a FrameMeister to have all
Yeah,
sorts of inputs in, but it had some limitations, right? Are you familiar with it?
yeah. I never used it. I think most of the FrameMeisters have been replaced by the OSSC,
Hmm.
the open source scan converter.
They were
Let
hard
me.
to get a hold of as well, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly. The FrameMeisters, you had to be like on a waiting list for months to be able to get one.
yeah. Let's have a look here. I'm opening random pages. Yeah. From what I can see, I
No,
think
Evil,
that
you're screwed. You need to get all the
right.
different converters.
Yeah. No. As said, it's gonna. If you have, you need something that does um, RGB, so either with SCART or a component, and then you would need something to do composite. Like, everything together does not really exist unless you go for like the external devices that I mentioned, like the small one I use for the C64 has a VGA port, but you can also wire it up for RGB, and with that you can then use your composite video, or your RGB, or your VGA, or your HDMI. So I would be looking at try the EXTRON DSC301. I
Okay,
will also
extra.
type it in the chat.
But technically speaking, when you buy a converter, you want to have like it on the machine or next to the machine or always plugged to the machine so it's ready to go. So I never really like those solutions where it works for everything, because then you will need like multiple of those, and it feels like you're using like a cannon to solve something that could be done with a Swiss knife. Or actually, a Swiss knife is a bad analogy because Swiss knife has a lot of tools. So something that's like
Yep.
very specific for the solution. Like a converter makes more sense because it's just converting this console to HDMI, and
Yep.
then you figure out what you want to do with the 5 or 6 HDMIs that you have lying around.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you can plug those into any cheap HDMI switch box,
Yeah,
for your home usage on your TV. That will be enough.
yeah. And I think that's a bit more reliable. But it's also nice to have something that like works for everything that someone can throw at it. It comes with a weird machine, shows up at your house, and hey, yeah, I have something that converts that signal, and then we can just see
Yeah,
it on TV
yeah.
and capture it. That's also
So
useful.
yeah, so your basis would be something that does composite video and RGB, and then take it up from there. Those
Hmm.
are the most common ones, of course. When you have really old stuff that only does RF, yeah, you're gonna be out of luck.
Um, what else did I want to ask? I had one more question, and of course, I'm drawing a blank right now at what it was. I should have noted them down. This was a great stream. A lot of technical details, but thank you very much for
Well,
the technical detail, technical problems. But the presentation was good, so thank you for
yeah,
that. And the YouTube video will be available, so people can check
yep.
that without the technical issues that we suffered from. Trying desperately to remember the question that I had in my head. Oh yeah, it's
Okay.
about the 50 Hertz and 60 Hertz thing. Is there
Oh,
like a
oh
way
yeah.
that someone will not grumble at that you can just, convert 50 to 60 early on in the cycle and people won't complain about, I saw that line
No,
there breaking.
it's really hard. You would have to have, as said, you would have to have your entire chain in 50 or 60 hertz from the moment something in the middle does a conversion, and you know what to look for. You will see it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's impossible nowadays to really. Well, it's possible to see things in 50 hertz, but everyone has their systems planned for 60. So
yep.
whatever
It,
you're doing, like that, it's cloud or sharing. Even if the people know it's supposed to be played at 50, they have to change their monitor resolution. So they're
exactly.
probably not gonna bother. So it's
No, no, no,
really
no, no.
it's more of a quirk
You would
nowadays.
have really you would need to have a separate monitor that you would put to 50 hertz,
Yeah,
and even then, um, it could be
nice.
that the driver is in 50 hertz, so that it's sending out in 50 hertz, and the panel still says, "Ha ha, fuck no," and it still does 60.
Yeah, but I guess a dedicated machine for 50 hertz stuff, that's sort of a
Yeah,
solution. Or a
well,
dedicated monitor. I guess if you have
yes.
multiple monitors, you can have
If
one
you
just
want
for
to be
50.
really sure, you would like come really close to like a separate TV that you connect on HDMI, or have like an old CRT screen next to it that you sure can do 50 hertz. Um, but yeah, you are getting really close to nitpicking country,
Yeah,
where you get into the area of people who are never happy.
yeah. Um, I when I was doing when I was trying to capture the ZX Next, it outputs 50 hertz because that's what the
Yep,
spectrums do, obviously. The graphics card managed to work on 50 hertz, the Elgato that you mentioned. I have
yep,
a
yes,
similar
it
one,
does.
so that was pretty good. And then I had to change OBS to have 50 hertz profile to be streaming in 50 hertz.
Yes,
And even then, the viewers have to set their monitors to 50 hertz. So it's like three
yes.
things or four things that you need to be careful of to make sure that everything is in 50 hertz. My monitor also needed to be in 50 hertz.
Yes,
So
and then don't forget that Twitch and YouTube also must recognize it, or they
yeah,
will redo it in 60 hertz.
yeah. And like all your effort is for nothing.
It's gone, and now YouTube is starting to do 50 hertz, but it's experimental,
Hmm.
and it's not always picked up. So if I upload a file in 50 hertz from a Chips and Bricks show, it's like a 50% chance that YouTube will recognize it as a 50 hertz file.
I thought it was better at recognizing. At least the live stream should be saying what hertz it is, because on OBS you can define that. So I would assume that OBS sending out says, okay, this is 50 hertz, watch out. And they would be able to
Yeah,
use that
well,
information somehow.
it I might be in bad luck as to which encoding farm I'm talking to. I have no idea.
Okay. Well, good to know. Well, I guess that's it, unless anyone has any other questions. I don't see anyone asking anything on the chat. So I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, FRaNKy, for your seminar. It was really interesting. And both for people at home that want to have like their man cave full of old hardware, hook everything up to HDMI outputs. What about when we move to DP? How's that going to look? You're fucked? Or are you just going to find out something that turns HDMI into DP? Just so you can see everything in 4K.
I really see no use to scaling old school machines into 4K.
Need bigger pixels.
Yeah, you'll just you'll just strain your neck vertebra looking up and down to these big screens.
I'm gonna assume that in like 5-10 years, 1080p won't be standard anymore. That we will have 4K or even 8K already as the standard,
Well,
and then everything that does only like 520 or something like that, it won't be supported by new TVs anymore.
It's already there, like the Mini only does 720p and up, so that's already a start for the lower things already gone out. I think for your high-end displays will be the first one to drop it, although your generic supermarket TVs with the cheaper chipsets and yada yada will still that's where your best backwards compatibility is, your small 19-inch LCD TV will still have a SCART input these days, where the rest of the TVs will no longer have it, for instance.
Yeah, but then like people start doing parts for these TVs, you can't find them anymore, or if you find them, you have to repair them, and it's a bitch. Retro support is always a bitch.
Every new generation you drop a bit of backwards compatibility, and then you will end up with somewhere, when the entire world goes 8K, you will find cheap 4K scalers, and you pick those up.
How do you get a Betamax tape working on 8K? I would like to see that.
A Betamax tape on 8K.
It's analog, it's not digital, so how do they plug it in?
You would use the composite video worst case and go from there. But then you better hope it's a first generation copy of your tape, because when you're 4 or 5 generations down,
you're gonna see some smudges.
You're gonna have a very psychedelic experience on your screen.
That sounds great. That's gonna be the whole new wave, new drug. It's watching old Betamax stuff on 8K with all the psychedelic effects on it. Anyways, that's it. Thank you so much, FRaNKy, for the seminar. Let's try to find someone to raid. Lynn Drum is doing her DJ set, so actually I think she's playing Earthbound, but we're gonna raid her anyways.
I'm gonna go here and just say tell OBS to stop.